I'd like to open the meeting for public comment. Seeing none, we'll close the meeting for public comment at 6:38. Taking attendance, in attendance is Chris Wolf, Ned Carpenter.
Here.
Brian Rowley.
Here.
Scott Foster.
Here.
Richard Lesavoy was excused and Danielle Honan was excused. Brian Hickey is not here. Neither is Brian Ward nor Amy Tilton. Okay, so, right. So let's, so today's agenda is principally the school district presenting their Q3 financials. And I'd like to welcome Jana. Jana Mellon, who's the business administrator.
Hi, good evening. These are for Q3, which ended March 31st. So little time between now and then. I do plan to have another set of financials in the coming weeks, but I can't really go into the details of that until they're presented to the board. So we'll have to remain here. For those of you who might be new to the school district financials, we typically present these in the same format.
Hiding behind the camera.
Okay. All right, well, my friend. Anyways, we usually present these in the same format. I start off with an explanation about our expenditures. We move into a discussion about the revenues, and then I kind of finish up with any things that I think you need to know down the road or related to other matters. And then at the back, you can see the actual financials themselves. They're grouped together by category. With following each particular statement, there is an explanation of variances seen on that statement, so you can kind of read through and see why things were up or down. So that's kind of the lay of the land for the new folks there. Starting off, as most of you realize, even though we are coming out of our COVID pandemic, there are still some lingering residual economic effects felt all around by the school as well. For us, it's manifested sort of in a couple different ways. One, we're still facing some supply chain issues and some lag times on different things that we order. Staffing in certain categories has remained a challenge for us, mostly in those essential roles of supporting, directly supporting students. While we're fully staffed with teachers, it's been in our support roles like facilities techs and para-educators that have been a challenge to fill. We implemented a program with the board back in the fall to allow us to offer a $1,000 hiring bonus and retention bonus for those categories of employees. It was very successful. We did attract numerous people. We are now fully staffed in our facilities group. We still have a few openings in our paraprofessional group, but the program has ended because a condition of it was that they had to complete 3 months of service in order to be eligible. So as of March 30th, the program is done. The total price tag for that program came to just under $50,000, and that amount was offset by vacancies in our staffing where we had unfilled positions, so we didn't use any additional budget for that. Utility costs are no surprise. They've been a little bit volatile. We've all seen that at the pumps and in our oil tanks. The school district is not immune to that, but we were able to offset some of it by working with the town and our energy consultants to lock in a fixed rate for our propane. We primarily use propane on the school side. And while it wasn't the best rate we've ever seen, we did ride out the market pretty well this year. We locked in at a lower rate. We have 1 more year on that 2-year contract, but as we work with our energy consultant, if the rates look like they might be more favorable in the next year, we would take the 1 year that's left and spread it out over 2 to try and minimize the impacts. So we do not anticipate that while I still anticipate a negative variance in utilities, I do not anticipate that it's going to be as large as we anticipated. Our food service program, we switched over to a food service management model this year fully. In the past, we had just one school operating under a management model. This year, due to staffing challenges, we found the need to fully move over. It's been very successful. We've had a lot of great feedback from students and staff about that program. Even though we've had some negative impacts of shortfalls in food quantities and had to make some menu shifts at the last minute this year, those seem to be evening out at this point in the year. So we have been able to run our program pretty successfully. At the close of last year, due to federal waivers that allowed us to feed students for free, we were reimbursed for every meal, in other words, that we sold. We wound up with a positive food service balance in our food service fund last year, which was unique. That hadn't happened in Newmarket in many, many years. And the way that the program works is when you have a positive balance in your food service program, you have to retain that balance. You can carry it forward and use it in your program, but you cannot return it to taxpayers because food service is supposed to be a nonprofit program where revenues and expenditures are equal. So we carried a positive balance in. While I do anticipate some negative variances in our collections for food service debt this year, a lot of folks are still having a hard time. We think that we should be able to weather that storm with our positive balance without having too much of an impact on our bottom line. We have actively been seeking several grants, many grants this year. Some of them have been very successful, and we've been happy to bring in that money. Others we haven't been as successful with. Two that we approached for the food service was we applied for a dairy grant. We won that. We were awarded that. So we were able to purchase equipment to allow us to offer smoothies to our junior, senior high school students, which they actually have really liked, fruit and milk kind of drinks, expanding our options to students. And the other one that we applied for is a National School Lunch Equipment Grant. We applied for some industrial food processing units so that we can offer hummus and fresh salsas and fresh soups and things to our students, and we applied for one at each school. We were awarded just one, so it will be going to the junior senior high, but we're in the process of ordering that and getting that brought in, so that I'm not sure if we'll be able to get a whole lot of benefit in the remainder of this year, but we certainly should have it on deck for next year. So that's always a good thing when we can take advantage of grants. We also applied for 4 different projects under a state grant program called the SAFE grant. It was a program geared at increasing security and systems in schools. It was particularly open to schools. So we applied, without going into too much detail about what we applied for, because obviously the nature of them is security, so we don't want to give too much away. But we were approved for 3 out of the 4 grants. One is integrated security system. We already have active security systems, but this will enhance the systems we have. And the other 2 have some barrier type security measures that, again, I don't want to go into too much detail, but we have applied them, and we have taken advantage of them. So all told, those came to about another $140,000 worth of grant money, which is always great to get. And the final grant that we applied for is something, you may have heard of it in the news. It was $80 million was set aside for energy improvements at K through 12 schools. It was a highly, highly competitive award mechanism. We applied. We were hoping to utilize that remaining, if we won that grant, to use it for the remaining windows at the elementary school. We've replaced about half of them. We have about half left to go. But we were actually got a rating of discouraged to apply, which basically means they have you fill out a preliminary proposal. They don't want everybody to go through the full proposal if you're not going to be awarded the grant. So as we come into budget season, we'll be working with the board to come up with a plan to determine how we will replace those remaining windows at the schools. We've been using our grant funding. We still have quite a bit of money in ESSER funding, which is our version of the ARPA funds that you've heard the town talk about, I'm sure. So we have several projects underway with that. Some of them have to do with staffing, but we're quite excited about one of our projects, which is the elementary school playground that we're going to be renovating using part from the grant funding, part from a donation from our generous PTA, and some private funding that students have raised as well. So we basically are being able to replace the playground without impacting the tax base. So that's always exciting. As we come into the end of the year, we always try to hit our expenditure budget really well and plan well. But obviously when we can't hire people to fill roles and we have budget in those roles, you have money left at the end of the year. So we do anticipate that we will have some remaining expenditure budgets. Probably the biggest factor as we come into the end of the year in determining what our fund balance will be is actually on the revenue side. We have had some significant unanticipated revenues, which are a good thing, but they all add back into the fund balance that goes back to taxes. So among those, we had an extra $103,000 in FEMA revenues that actually corresponded to last year's expenditures, but we didn't get the money until after the close of the year, so we took it in as unanticipated revenue in this year, and that will be part of our balance. And we also have had our special education extraordinary need grant, which used to be, used to be called catastrophic aid, but now it's just called special ed aid. Every year they pay you based on a formula for if you're over a certain number of times the average cost of a student, and you get reimbursed a portion of that. It's kind of a moving target because it's based on available funding and the number of people that put in for that funding. So we guess, and our special ed director is very good at coming up with potential guess for that. But in this year, we actually got an extra amount over and above what we anticipated, about $300,000 extra that we hadn't planned on when we budgeted a year and a half ago. So as we come into the end of the year, we do anticipate a fund balance, the degree of which we have not yet calculated. We hope to have a little bit better sense of that partway through June, and again, it will go to the board first. We have a relatively early financial audit, usually the third week of July, so that's when we really close our books after the auditors have looked and said, yeah, you don't need to make any adjustments. So we anticipate being able to come back to the board and to the budget committee sometime in August with our final unexpended fund balance and proposals for that year.
So we don't have a meeting in July, so you are scheduled to present on the 28th of August?
That should be fine. I have to process my my state revenue forms by the 30th of August, so I usually don't like to get that close to that deadline.
Mm-hmm.
It is a challenging year this year for us. One of the things I didn't mention is another grant project that we have is we were able to use grant funding to procure a new financial software suite, which is usually a lot of money. It would have been about $80,000. And between comping some of the implementation services and between using grant funds, we are able to bring that again without impacting tax base. But if any of you have ever been through that pleasure, there's a lot of work that goes along with making that migration, and we're going live July 1st with that. So this spring is going to be quite busy, and probably the early weeks of July are going to be equally busy as we migrate over. So
good luck with that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I've thrown a lot at you. Does anyone have any questions for me or for Mr. Allen?
I have a question on the Department of Energy grant that you talked about there.
Yep.
You mentioned the windows, the elementary school windows.
Yep.
I seem to remember at some point last year, I thought we had discussed there was some sort of a reserve that was not used for energy the year before. You're shaking your head.
Capital reserve fund for utilities?
but it wasn't for energy. I thought some of that money was earmarked for the windows. Couldn't pay for it
Oh,
all.
well, we actually have, you are correct. We
Okay.
have an active part of our capital reserve. It was from the adequacy aid. You're absolutely right.
Okay.
We, the town voted to earmark money, additional monies for adequacy aid for two projects, the electricity and the windows. So you are absolutely correct. We are, because of the invasiveness of that window project, we are still using that. We're gonna wind up carrying some of that money into the summer, because we couldn't really disrupt classes during the year. We did a little bit of it last summer, but we really couldn't spin it up, during the school year while students were in session. So that will be carrying forward, that project will be
So
carrying
then
forward.
that project, those funds are not gonna complete that project.
They will complete the portion that we earmarked it for. We didn't have enough money to do the full project.
Got it.
But we do have funding to do the part that we contracted for, which was a little more than half the windows.
Okay.
We will be trying to look to plan with the board for that remaining piece as we come forward to try and find out a funding.
So there's
spec-
roughly half the windows in the elementary school
Yeah,
that
it-
still need to be addressed.
Yeah, probably a little more than half, because on the back side of the windows of the school, we don't have as many windows, but we primarily are focusing on the front side of the school where the largest windows and
Yeah.
our most complicated window systems are.
Yep.
Um,
And what do
Yeah.
how much are you anticipating you'll need in order to complete that project?
I'm not the best person to answer that right now because I have stale data. When we locked this project in, it was over 18 months ago, and aluminum is very unpredictable. What we got for a price at that time, I can guarantee you it's going to be higher than that now because of the cost of aluminum and the raw materials that go into that. So
Well,
what we would
Do
do,
you recall what the price was for what we've done? We've done 50%, so what was the price for that?
a little more than 50%, and it was just about $300,000
Okay,
at the
so you're looking
time.
at 300 plus something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say, but again, we would have to do an RFP, we would have to put that out to bid, and we would have to see,
I put an approximate sign on
Yeah.
next to that number, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions?
You know, I did have similar questions
Yeah.
on the grant, but I'm also curious, and not sure if this is in the scope, but does the Department of Energy give a rationale as to why they discourage application?
It's a good question. Literally, what we got was discouraged to apply.
That's it. Okay.
That's it. But I do suspect that there were some much more demographically challenged districts that threw their hat in the ring, and I think they probably factor that in.
Yeah.
Not that we don't have a need here, but I think there may have been other applicants that had a greater need.
Okay. But it still felt ultimately that doing the windows then from an energy perspective is.
Right, I mean, it does make sense. These are old windows, these are original to the building. Some of them are I think it was 1985. So some of them definitely are in need of replace. They're also a tilt-down window, which creates challenges for us because when we do summer school, so we try to put an air conditioning in that unit, you have to actually remove the sash. And then we worry about security because you have to put a piece of plywood up to cover the opening where the window can't lock and, and a mechanism to keep people from lifting the window. So, yeah, it definitely is something that we would like to address sooner rather than later. And we've tried, this is actually the second grant project we've tried for. We tried for a, I forget the one, a seed grant, school energy efficient grant through the state of New Hampshire, and we didn't win that one either. So we've tried for two, and we figure that at this point, we'll probably need to come up with a good solid plan B, get that project done.
So, looking at in your write-up, under local revenues, you have a conversation here about the USDA waivers. And, so it looks like in fiscal year '22, essentially, the U.S. Department of Agriculture paid for the meals for all the students the entire year.
Yeah, for that whole year and part of the year before. And, not to go too far into the political realm, but I would like to point out that New Hampshire is the only state in New England right now who did not continue that program. Massachusetts did, Vermont did, and Maine did. And we have some families that really need this
Yeah,
program.
so the next sentence says, we also anticipate a significant increase in unpaid student debt compared to unpaid student debt in fiscal year '23. I'm not sure, maybe you said, maybe you meant fiscal year '22. But what you're essentially saying here is that because the funding's running out, you have students who charge their meal, but
Right.
eventually the parents aren't able to fund it.
We have a school district policy that allows us to provide a reimbursable meal to any student who needs one, regardless of whether there is money on their food account or not. And so we do actively collect per that policy. We make our collection attempts, we send out emails, we send out letters. But at the end of the day, hungry kids don't learn. So we, we cover those costs for kids. When the meals were all free, the most telling thing that I think is we had a great participation, a much greater participation in our program when the meals were free. And it gives us a chance to get 2 nutritious meals out to kids regardless of what their family status is. And so it's sad to me that in New England we are one state that didn't continue that program. And I can honestly tell you that demographically we're not much different than the others around us. So it's kind of sad.
You're educating me while we're having this conversation. So you're saying that we don't have a program for underprivileged children to pay for their meals?
Not a robust one. Families can apply for SNAP benefits, but I don't know if you've been watching the news, they just scaled those way back. So families that were eligible under COVID are no longer eligible. A student that is eligible under SNAP automatically is eligible for the free meals at the school. But when you cut back on the number of kids that are eligible for SNAP, you cut back on the number of kids that get those meals as well.
Mm-hmm. So getting into your general, so this would be page 5. And obviously, we're all dealing with issues of staffing. One of the things I just thought was interesting is that from a professional staffing, you were able to get, from your spend perspective, you're 2.2% off of budget. So that must mean you've got about 98% of the professional staff that you want.
Are you looking at page 5 under?
Page 5, so if you look under
162,009?
salaries, the third line down.
Yep.
Has a budgeted value of 7.126 million.
Yep.
And you're running a favorable variance right now of 162,000, which is no, it's a little bit more than of the total budget. It's 2.2%. So in terms of the year-to-date income, well, you take that in the cumulative. So the 162 is about 2.2%. So you're carrying almost full employment on your professional staff.
We are. There is some grant funding that also plays in there. As I told you, through ESSER, we were able to put some folks into that grant. So that also plays in so that's probably part of what you're seeing. And again, ESSER funding will terminate in 2024. So all of it will.
So the next line item, which is paraprofessionals, tutors, and monitors, clearly that managing the classroom has to be a challenge, because that's 22%.
That's correct.
Off of
That's
budget.
why we did the hiring bonus.
You're down 80. You're down 20 odd percent of what you were anticipating for employment in that area.
That's correct. So we have supplemented. You'll notice down in the professional services that under operations that we've expended quite a bit, and as we go through the year, you're going to see that go even further into the negative. And part of that is we've hired paraprofessionals through an agency, for lack of a better word. So some of those salaries are being carried under professional services that would have been booked to the salary line.
In
So-
that professional services category, though, does that include the food service?
No, food service, not in, it does, but on the next page, and I have a separate budget for food service. But what this does include is our custodial, outsourced custodial staff.
Right.
It includes outsourced, you know, paraprofessionals. It includes a lot of our professional services, also things like coming in and fixing our HVAC and different things like that, where we have ongoing maintenance contracts are kind of grouped under there. Because this carries through our whole budget. This is gelled down into those categories, but it crosses our budget.
Right. So you've reduced custodial staff and hired out, contracted with a service.
Exactly. So when you see our facilities staff up above, you'll see that we're still sitting with money sitting in that line that we are expending elsewhere. And also in our, probably in our supplies and things as well. Any other questions?
So how are things in the classroom? Maybe that's something.
Maybe Mr. Allen can talk to you more
Todd
about
can
that.
answer that one. Let's just, is there anything else in the financials that we have that we'd like to ask Jana while she's here?
I just had more for curiosity, where you have started regarding the food services. Going forward, are you looking to continue along the line of using basically a company or something instead of doing it in-house, as they say?
Well, the challenge is that you either have a company in or you don't. So until you can build up a reserve where you could say, okay, I can fully staff my program, it's very difficult to kind of hybridize that together with a company. Same thing on the custodial. So, you know, we keep trying to attract people. We've done made a whole bunch of adjustments to our salary scales, our benefits. We've tried to really make it as attractive as possible, but we are not alone in challenges in that particular area of operations hiring down there. So it makes it challenging for us to not that we would not look at it or we wouldn't consider it, but it's a really hard sell to go back to say, okay, we're going to let this company go and we're going to hire it ourselves and then find out that we can't actually do that. So I think it's going to take a lot of discussion, and we're going to have a really good solid plan in place to make that happen, because right now overall things are going very, very well with the staffing that we have. That management service is helping us a lot to really continuity of operations. So.
Right, and trying to compare the numbers where this one now has a surplus, this one now has maybe a deficit.
Yeah.
Numbers-wise, even, are we saving a little money? Are we spending a little more money for what we're getting?
Well, if you turn to page 7, that is our food service account. So you can see there in the professional services, you'll look and you'll see, oh yeah, that's a negative. But you look up above at salaries and you see a positive. That's exactly that factor that you're talking about. So when you see down the bottom, as of the time that these financial statements were created, we were still 18,000 to the positive in our food service, even with that model shift.
I'm just curious, with that said, would we really entertain bringing it back in-house?
I mean, the reason we went in this direction in the first place was our inability to do it
Right.
ourselves.
You were forced to.
We were forced to. There
Right.
really wasn't an option. In fact, we actually did sort of have a hybrid food service program last year that we had. It was the high school was running under Fresh Picks, and the elementary school was our own. And as soon as staff left, we were not able to do that. So it's highly unlikely that we would be able to do that. And frankly, given where we're at with it, it's debatable whether that's a direction we want to go. I mean, I think one of the things that people often have when you start talking about outsourcing things, people jump to the conclusion, okay, you're not going to hire local people and all that kind of stuff. It's all the same people. It's just it's just being managed by an external entity, and frankly, the quality of the food has been exceptional.
Yeah.
In fact, they're providing the pizza for the superintendent forum on Wednesday nights. If you want to come test it out.
Yeah.
So
That's always the question.
As a comment, I mean, I would think that, having outsourced that and the janitorial piece as well, you still have to supervise but it's not a management, day-to-day management piece for you, so you can focus on educating kids as opposed to providing
Yeah.
food.
There are pros and cons. So
Sure.
we still do a lot of management, but now we're managing a contract.
Right.
We're not managing individual people. And the other part that you know, makes it a little challenging when you have your own staff is you have to cover vacations, 6 days, and all those things. When you outsource, that's becomes the food service management's role to fill those. So I think that regardless of whether we had our in-house or our out-service models, I think our costs would have gone up anyways, just because of the economic climate. I think right now, this is definitely meeting our needs. We're happy with the solutions that we have in place right now. And that, we always evaluate our models. We always evaluate our need. And at some point, we may look back at it and take another look at it. But for right now, we feel like this is the best solution for our students. It's the best solution for our facilities. We've just invested a lot of money in these facilities, and we want to make sure that they're maintained and that we have adequate staff to do that. And just one final thing about the facilities model where we outsource the custodial tranche. We still kept every single one of our people as a facilities technician, but what we have done is we've trained them into a new entirely different role. So they're getting a little bit higher pay, but they're also learning how to operate our building automation system. They're learning how to do basic plumbing. They're learning how to do those things. And when you think about what that means, it means that we're bringing some of that preventative maintenance back in-house, and we're taking care of it with our staff. So I do anticipate that as we go through the next couple years, it doesn't happen immediately because you have a learning curve and you have people that are learning a new role. But I think over time, you're going to see we're not hiring painters. We're not doing as much with plumbing. We're not, we're able to change the filters in our HVAC system ourselves. So, we really are trying to be the most cost efficient and effective with the resource that we have, and we're treating our people and like the valued employees they always have been, but offering them additional training and offering them some additional perks to stay, because we have a smaller staff and they really do a fantastic job.
Kind of curious, and that's great to hear everything you said, and it sounds like you're doing good while doing well. I'm curious about the food service management companies. How competitive is that space in the area? When you put out the RFP, did you get a lot of proposals, or do you?
It's sort of like our transportation. You get a couple big players, and that's it. Like we have in our transportation, we have one player that we've had for many years. They do it well, and they do it for a large area, but no, there's not a whole lot of competitive competition in that space. That said, the food service program is highly, highly regulated, right? So we have a contract that I think it's 42 pages long with this company about all the things that they're going to do and how they're going to do it and what our role is. So when we say that we've outsourced it, and I talk about managing the contract, a lot of those functions that used to be done by our internal food service director have come back to my office. So we do a monthly audit of our food service. We look at the invoices, we reconcile that. We are the only people that do the free and reduced applications, because that's not something we can outsource to somebody else. It's confidentiality. But there's an awful lot of attestation that we do, and my accounting assistant and myself, we spend a lot of time going through those numbers. Like I said, every month we reconcile against what they send us for a statement. At the end of the year, per that contract, there has to be a reconciliation payment, meaning that they tell us what they think the cost is going to be, and then as we come into the end of the year, if we've overpaid based on that cost, they owe us the money back. So it's very highly regulated.
So I guess the most important question on it is how do the students feel about the quality of the food?
I think I'll let Mr. Allen speak to that.
Yeah, certainly the kids eat a lot of food. And certainly I've heard lots of positive stories about the new smoothie machine. So the quality of the food is really good. I think in many ways the transition was seamless. I don't know that people even noticed that we were outsourcing service at the elementary school. In fact, until much later in the year, the kids were unaware of it. So I think the kids are enjoying it. I think it's great meals. The pricing structure, we still control all of that.
Yep.
So in the end, the experience is really good for kids.
And we've also worked to implement a couple of new programs with the students. We have a program called Breakfast After the Bell. So kids can come in the morning and get a breakfast, but then at 10 o'clock in the morning or not, whenever their break is scheduled in their building, their parents can fill out a request, and the cafeteria staff will provide them a reimbursable breakfast at that time, where a lot of, especially the older kids, they're not hungry right first thing in the morning. They want to eat a little later. So we've expanded that programming. That's going pretty well. We always try to use them as our caterers. Like if we have a staff day or, the end of school day, the breakfast back to school, we always try to utilize them because that's money that goes right back into our program. So we try and be as efficient with what we have. We take it very seriously that this is taxpayer money, and we try to be very good stewards with that money. So.
Any more questions for Jana? I'd just like to say thank you. Your report is always complete, it's thorough, it's explanatory, it's a pleasure to read.
Oh, well, great, thank you so much, I'm glad to hear that.
And I probably don't need to say this, but all of the great work that's gone on within our finance department really traces back to Jana's efforts. She's on top of these things. I get the privilege of being able to work alongside her and say, yeah, that's a good idea, Jana, go for it. And we've fortunately done an awful lot of really positive things in the last year. So thank you, Jana, for your hard work.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you. Any more questions for Todd? Eddie? So we were asking about how you felt with the shortages on paraprofessionals, how you felt the student experience was this year.
It has been a challenge. I mean, you need to combine that with the shortage of substitutes, because I think the two things go hand in hand. One of the things that became very prominent during the pandemic was you had this sort of all hands on deck mentality, and while you may have paraeducators who were hired to do a particular task, if the priority on a given day is we're down an adult that needs to cover a classroom, it's very challenging. Over the course of this year, I think things have settled down. They're better now than they were certainly 9 months ago. We did negotiate what I consider to be a very competitive new paraeducator contract for next year, which I'm very optimistic will help us to fill a lot of the vacancies. One of the struggles we had all along was we were on the very lower end of the competitive scale compared to the Exeters, Portsmouths, Oyster Rivers around us, and this new contract allows us to be a little more competitive, and so I'm confident we'll be fully staffed. As we end this school year, I mean, we have 45 paraeducators that we ideally would have. I think the last time that I spoke to Erica, we had 39 in place, so even now at our high point, we're still 6 short of where we want to be. So certainly if we can get fully staffed, that will have a real significant positive impact for kids. And then, of course, the other component is hoping that the world returns to normal with regards to people willing to sub in our buildings, because the less you have to pull people to cover functions that they're really not hired for, the more we can focus on the educating of kids. In general, we have really, really good employees that knock themselves out every day to try to make things as seamless as possible for kids. So my general observation is our kids don't notice it so much, but you can definitely see it on the faces of the adults who are running between rooms, covering extra things. I'm really hopeful that next year we can minimize that by being closer to fully staffed. But on the professional side, we're actually in a very good place, as you noted in some of the financial data. I just offered a job to a person who is for a reading specialist literacy coach position today, and then we have one more special educator position to fill, and at that point all of our professional staff vacancies that we know of right now will have been filled, which puts us in a good place heading into the summer and for the start of the fall. So professional staff wise, we're in very good shape. Again, it's the hourly people that are the hardest to keep filled and keep staffed.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Any other questions for Todd? No?
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the other business was to review the minutes and from the April 24th meeting and to vote on Tim, Tim's a accounting professional who's recently retired and moved to New Hampshire. Excellent choice. And but we're going to have to wait another month. My apologies. We need a quorum to be able to accept your application. So our apologies for that, but thank you very much, and we appreciate your interest in being involved. Okay, anything else for the committee?
Just a quick question on
Hopefully he
the-
doesn't think
Yes.
too much about it over the next month and change his mind.
On the topic of quorum, is page 45 of the charter, does that give us a definition for it, or is that applying to something else? I think it's
Yeah.
section
I was
C.
flipping through very quickly to be 100% certain.
I was trying to use the search function on this thing, but I think it's a simple majority. I don't know
Right,
if
well, we
that's-
have 9. There's 9 and we have 4.
Okay,
Yeah,
so, but that would be our.
if we had 5, we'd be good.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the way it normally would be, is you need a simple majority to proceed.
So is that something that the town council needs 4? How many, there must be 8 then?
Yeah.
On council?
We were doing fine, except we had a couple excuses, and then that put us on the precipice, and then one absence, so. So again, my apologies, but let's talk afterwards, so everyone can get to know you. Okay? Can I entertain a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay. Second? All right, it's made by Ned, seconded by Brian, and all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.